While The Exorcist Believer's second trailer draws attention to the horror franchise's famous history, it also signals that the movie is taking a huge reboot risk. Let me know in the comment section if you think the new Exorcist will be good or a flop. But before I see my daughter run down the stairs backwards like a crab, I then burn it down and tell her to keep the house, I'd like to say hello guys and gals, I'm Nick, and welcome to 30's Feedback. So, a lot of horror reboots inevitably end up drawing on their predecessors. This isn't always a bad thing, as evidenced by Scream 2022. That sequel managed to reboot the Scream franchise and do justice to its original heroes, while simultaneously setting up a new cast of characters. However, Scream 2022's ability to balance the legacy of the franchise with a new story was the exception, not the rule. While The Exorcist Believer looks to pay off a 50-year promise, the long-awaited franchise reboot runs the risk of playing into the legacy of its predecessor too much. None of the earlier sequels, prequels or reboots of The Exorcist managed to recapture the potency of the original psychological horror movie, and this was due in part to their reverence for the 1973 film. While few movies have been able to replicate the cultural impact of 1973's original The Exorcist, a big element that hurt earlier follow-ups was the inability to take a risk and move on from the franchise's iconic lead. Blair gave an outstanding performance in The Exorcist, and this came to define the franchise. One major Exorcist sequel mistake that The Exorcist Believer needs to avoid is focusing on Blair's character over its new protagonists. However, the second trailer is not too promising in this regard. The trailer opens with a scene in which a possessed child talks to Ellen Burstyn's returning exorcist heroine about Regan's fate. This focuses on Blair's character and reminds viewers of her story. However, drawing attention to Blair's role is an inherently high-risk proposition. For one thing, it's not clear from the trailer whether Blair will even appear in The Exorcist reboot. Even if Blair does reprise the role of Regan, it is obvious that she won't be the movie's main character. As such, her character's legacy should not be allowed to overshadow The Exorcist Believer's new heroes. The second trailer doesn't tell viewers anything new about the two young heroines who are possessed by demons in the sequel, but it does feature a long sequence discussing Blair's Regan. Hyping up Blair's potential The Exorcist Believer return is one thing, but focusing on her character's comeback over the movie's ostensible main character repeats a frustrating pattern seen in other recent reboots of famous horror franchises, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022 or Halloween Ends. The Exorcist Believer might be so busy focusing on Regan's return that the reboot will fail to center its new characters and real heroes. Too often, horror franchise reboots expend so much energy building up their heroine's comeback that they fail to get viewers invested in their new characters. This would be particularly problematic in the case of Regan, as she was both the heroine and villain of The Exorcist. Viewers already associate Blair's character with the franchise, meaning that The Exorcist Believer should be establishing new characters and stories instead of drawing even more attention to its existing main attraction.